Oh, yes. Welcome to Thursday, everybody. It's Thursday, January 3rd. Welcome to Cloud Talk Live, everyone. My name is Jeff DeVerter, and I'm so glad you're here. Hey, everyone. As always, I want to encourage you to introduce yourselves. We'd love to know who is here and where you're from. We have a worldwide audience, and I so do appreciate that you guys are coming in from all over the place. And of course, if you want to get a hold of us, as always, you can right there at that email address, solve@rackspace.com. That will come not just to me, I will get it, it'll come to the entire production team. Producer Daniel hanging out in the background, he will be there. Hey, Todd's here. Awesome Racker Todd. You guys should all become friends with Todd. Naveed is here from India. This is not your first rodeo. Glad that you are here today as well. Kirby, I don't have time to explain. Okay, thanks, Kirby. But glad you're here. Hey, everyone, let's move on with our morning. Turn off that fancy music. Manish is here. Austin, Texas is here. Hey, Austin, Logan, how is your weather? Because I'm down here outside of San Antonio, and it's an icy old mess. And we don't do that very well in Texas, do we? No, we do not. Lindsay Ribble is here. Lindsay, I'm out in Medina. How are things in San Antonio this morning? All right, let's move on with our program. A lot of San Antonios here today. This is really a lot of fun. Let me bring this over yonder. And that brings us to, of course, This Week in Cloud. So if I were to push that button and that button right there, we get into our first article of the day. Now, if you will recall, last week we had my good friend, now why isn't this coming up? There it is. My good friend John Eitel on. Lindsay, you remember John. He was on last week. He's over at a company called Canva, and he alluded to the fact they were making an acquisition that was going to be a game changer in the way they go about telling the story of data. And they've announced it, actually. They went about a company, really interesting company called Flourish. You can go check them out. They have 70... They bring 800,000 of their own customers to the Canva platform. They've raised over $1 million in VC money over the years. Now Canva owns them wholeheartedly, and I cannot wait to see how that platform gets integrated into the Canva platform, because it's all about how we tell stories with data. In fact, if you think about the power of what the cloud and the capabilities, bring there. It's more and more data, more and more information in just one or two locations. Hey, the Philippines are here. Awesome. And becomes harder and harder to make sense of some of that data. Well, Flourish has done an amazing job. Go check out some of their demos out on their site. You can we'll be bringing up a link here shortly of where you can go to this article and learn more about it as well, just by heading over to rackspace.com/solve/90. Welcome to episode 90, my good friends. All right, also in the news, Alphabet announced their earnings, and of course, they blew it out of the water. Their cloud revenue jumped not 10%, not 25%, 45% since last earnings. Absolutely incredible, guys. This is the age of the cloud. It's all growing. And if you ask me, if you were to say, hey, Jeff, what does all this mean? Well, the clouds are growing. These hyperscale clouds continue to grow. Is it just going to continue like that for a long time? Is that all we're going to see? Well, you're going to continue to see lots and lots of growth in the hyperscale clouds. But what you're also going to see, and we talked about this on Tuesday, remember with that acquisition of Citrix by Vista Partners, they're combining several different pieces of capability into a single new suite of software to be a fully collaborative cloud. You're going to see these specialty clouds growing more and more. All right, let's move on. Guys, that takes us up to this week in cloud from a release perspective. Let's talk about those releases. Amazon FSx, the file server for Windows File Server, is now FedRAMP compliant, which it's huge. You just ask my good friend Brad, and he will, here at Rackspace, he leads our government solutions. He will tell you there's so much growth happening from a cloud point of view in the federal space. So So Amazon FSX is now FedRAMP moderate in U.S. East, that's Northern Virginia, Ohio, and West, Northern California, Oregon, and then GovCloud East as well. So if you're in the government space, have you some files. All right. Over to Azure. What's new from Azure this week today? So general availability, deployment enhancements for SQL Server on Azure virtual machines. Now, virtual machines. Jeff, you guys, I can just hear you asking me this question. Hey, good morning, Phil. Glad you're here. Here you asked me this question. You're always talking about all of this cloud native stuff, and now we're talking about virtual machines. Well, that's exactly right. We are talking about virtual machines here because not everything upgrades at the same time. What I love about this article is the fact that not just SQL or Azure in this context, you find this as true being over on Google as well as on Amazon, and that is they continue to upgrade everything. They want to make sure that there isn't a workload that you have that can't run in an amazing fashion, even in a traditional sense, running a SQL server on a VM inside of Azure. So that's a pretty cool thing. They continue to upgrade those features. There's a bunch of them there. You're going to want to go check that out if you're an Azure person. Amar, I'm glad that you're here. Welcome. All right, now over from Google, Query Insights lets you configure the query sampling rate. Now this is kind of heady. So Query Insights helps you detect and diagnose and prevent query performance problems in cloud-based SQL environments. It seems like this is the morning for SQL updates. So now we're able to, on the Google side, tune that rate and make sure that your performance of your SQL-based applications, continues to run great. All right. Well, that means, if you want to go check out any of this information, of course, go over to rackspace.com/solve/90. As a reminder, Solve is Rackspace's thought leadership platform. As such, you will not be sold to on that webpage. So no pop-ups asking, how can I help you today? If you want that, go up to rackspace.com. I'm sure there'll be a happy pop-up for you. But if you just want to get some of the information from today's episode, all of the links, all of the updates, all of the information can be found on that site right there. Now, with that, you can also go find out about the Rackspace Job of the Day. That's right. We are hiring so many people in so many regions all around the world. There are jobs all over the place. And so today's is a manager of technical support for Azure. Now, this job specifically is inside of what we call our SE division or system engineers. And so as we are helping architect and design new solutions for customers, that's what the SE team does. They come alongside with all their Azure smarts and help make sure we design and build an amazing Azure environment. And this is for a manager in that team. So if you are interested in that, just head on over. You want somebody who can provide strategic leadership and direction for the support engineer team or systems engineer team. So head on over there and check that out. You can find it at rackspace.com/solve/90. That's right. And of course, the audio from all of these episodes can be found in the Cloud Talk stream, because this is Cloud Talk live after all. And so you can get all the information you want. If you are unable to make any of these live events, but you want to keep up to date with the mayhem that is this program, then just subscribe to the program. I'll tell you also, you're going to want to make sure you're subscribed up, because I had a really great interview yesterday for a podcast episode with a woman named Kara Nichols. Kara is a longtime Racker, and she ran our community outreach programs here for a good decade. And she wrote a book, and it's an amazing book and an amazing story. You're going to want to make sure that you subscribe so that you can check that out. All right, so with that, we move on to our cloud discussion. Guys, I am so excited to get to bring up to stage Scott Schlueter. Scott is a product manager in our security team. I'm going to turn that little button off. I'm going to come back to here where I can see what I'm doing and say, all right, let's go ahead and bring Scott up. Scott, welcome to Cloud Talk Live.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh man, so glad that you're here. So everyone, you should know that Scott has jumped into the serious deep end of how can I be a participant in this new company I work for. Scott, how many days have you worked for Rackspace?
I think I'm on day 9 right now.
Day nine, yeah. And you're on a live stream representing the company. What?
But I've been in the security industry for quite a bit, so it's We talk about it, we evangelize it, and this is just another day.
Just, well, to that end, let's talk about that a second. Give me a bit of your background. You mentioned being in security for a while. Why don't you tell the good folks a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so I was very, very fortunate to kind of cut my teeth on a little security company called Internet Security Systems that got acquired by IBM. And that was tech support. So you
Mm.
learn a lot about tech support, and you almost get afraid of technology in there. And then I went off to be the lead security engineer at a local university, and then moved on to a children's hospital where I became the enterprise architect, and that's where I came from previous to this. And I got some great exposure uh, to all the various different technologies, all the challenges with trying to modernize workforces
Yeah.
And secure them.
Yeah, running that balance of how do you modernize at the same time make sure that the bad guys don't get in and do bad things.
Yeah, and in that last role, I was particularly motivated because it's the pediatric hospital system, right? So my kid's data is in there, so I'm very motivated to do the right thing.
That's the last kind of data that you want to have exploited by the bad guys doing bad things. Well, and it brings us a bit to our conversation today. But before we do that, Ari Goldstein asked a really interesting question, and it was in relation, I think, to some of the cloud news that I was going through before. And Ari, I apologize, I couldn't see the screen at the time. It said in Azure, they have something that called serverless, wherein a programmer can see analytics in their programming and find where the latency is. Does Google or Amin, or probably AWS, offer this? Yes, there are features and capabilities for monitoring the performance of all of your applications in the hyperscale clouds. They call them different things, of course, but they are all capabilities that exist across all three hyperscale clouds. That is a great question. Thanks, Ari. Then I see that you are not a fan, as you say, of Azure. I am a fan of Azure. I'm a fan of all of them. They all have their place and excel in different things. Really, what it comes down to is your ability as an organization to adopt this type of transformational change. And Scott, that really kind of gets to the heart of what we want to talk about today, and that is through modernization. It brings more and more power to the end user, being able to do more and more stuff. So, as somebody who was in charge of for the past 8 years, keeping end user computing and all computing secure at a children's hospital, what was your approach? How did you go about this?
So there's trends, right? There's the trends where we mainframe everything, we control the experience, and then it becomes consumerized and it's all distributed, and so it kind of goes back and forth, right? Now I think we're very much in the swing of, especially with COVID, just distributed workforces. Build your tool sets that help empower you and your teams, and I think that, especially in healthcare, you tend to lag behind because there's you don't have the type of agility you might necessarily want,
Right.
and you're in a supporting role versus the active driver's seat like you are on the vendor side of the house. But to get to the point of your question, to keep your endpoints secure, you need to have visibility, control, and if they are very much distributed, then you need to rethink the way that you do your tooling.
Right.
Your traditional antivirus is not going to work. You're going to probably need to use something that's a little bit more cloud centric and cloud ready.
Well, and since you mentioned earlier that you were at that children's hospital for about 8 years, so you went from probably a more centralized experience to a decentralized experience as everybody scampered home to work remote. Kind of walk us through the change in methodology that and some of the challenges that you had to experience going through that.
Well, the first one thing is a literal denial of service. When you have an entire workforce that changes from an office environment to that of working from home, then now you have to greatly increase your infrastructure resources and rethink the way that you do your security. When you bottleneck everything through what would traditionally be a campus network and an on-premise data center, then you find out that simple things like people checking the weather, people checking the news for how much did it ice? What is the local broadcast doing? These little things, they compile.
Yeah, they stack up really quickly.
And so, but then you have to change the paradigm of how you protect your users and your clients, because now you don't want to bottleneck everything through the enterprise. You want to just promote those connections based off of the applications they're trying to access, and yet you're still trying to provide some basic content filtering, protect those assets if they do get compromised, and have that visibility. So you start going into that split tunnel methodology, or really a distributed filtered environment, if depending on what solution you have adopted.
Right.
And in our particular case, we got very far with still using some of the traditional technologies like VPN, but then also using some content filtering capabilities through DNS, very simple, to make sure that we were using our work resources appropriately, and that they weren't necessarily compromised.
So Philip Wyatt is a friend of the program and is here quite frequently. He's with Zscaler. He did post up some resources there. They do have some really great solutions around for these types of solutions. Philip is going to be on the program to go into a little greater depth at some point. Scott, familiar with the Zscaler suites?
Yeah. In fact, SASE solutions are meant to solve this. And if you have like a distributed network, and you've embraced SD-WAN, you're probably need to be looking at SASE as well. So you got Zscaler, Cisco has an offering, and Cloudflare is another good option as well.
Excellent. Let's see here. Naveen asked an interesting question, and that is, what's the checklist for advanced endpoint security? Is there an exhaustive checklist, or can you run through a list of here are the things you really need to think about?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I would say that, traditionally we have, really locked down the endpoints, but with them being so distributed, now you need to have, tight source provisioning. Make sure that you have a good solid image on there that you can maintain control. You need visibility as to what has changed, but then I think from there you're really protecting the workload, and I think that's the big change, right? You're not controlling all the assets that you possibly can. You're trying to protect the workload, and that's from who the user is, what is their identity, where are they coming from, what asset are they using, and that contextualizes their level of access.
Right. Yeah. So talk to me about zero trust in this context as well. How does that, it's the buzzword of the day. So how does that fit into endpoint?
I have a love-hate relationship with that term, zero trust, because it is sold as a product, but really it's like a lifestyle.
Yeah.
So
you can't go buy one off the shelf. Can I have a zero trust, please?
Right. And it goes back to that layered defense, right? And where you're trying to bring in components of identity and access control, and make sure that you have the right roles and responsibilities defined, and that you have adaptive policies that can respond based off of the context of how that connection, how that user is changing over time. You may have an administrator and they should have access. They should have full access, but something's off. Maybe we just in the middle of things say, hey, you have the right access, but could you just do an MFA verification for me? and oh, you failed that. Oh, that's unusual. um, and and that's just the identity side. You also have the network context with how you ensure that all your network connections coming in are filtered, and you have some layer 7 visibility. So you start piling on all the various different layers, and instead of implicit access that you might have traditionally, now you're being very explicit about what resources need to be exposed and how they're interacted with. So it's
Gets
very
down to
much
being
looking at an allow list model.
very purposeful, and we were chatting before we went live about how segmentation even plays into that, and how do you it's one of the pieces of the strategy. Maybe you can chat a little bit about that.
Yeah, so segmentation. I mean, I think if you pursue zero trust, you're going to get segmentation along the way. You naturally will. And segmentation implies you can look at it from a few different angles. You can look at it from the security hat, and you can look at it from, really an infrastructure hat too, where, you could look at it from fault domains. I want to make sure that when something blows up, and it only blows up in this little spot right here.
Blast radius. Let's limit the blast radius.
Right. And that's that, if you're, in the cloud, you're looking at availability zones, or you're looking at workload placement. If you're looking at it from a security perspective, you're trying to prevent, lateral compromise, right? You say, okay, these workloads over here, these are my cattle. If they fall over, that's okay. I have anticipated that this can happen. We're going to cycle them. We're going to start over, and we know that it is essentially quarantined and mitigated to just this area.
Yeah.
And segmentation helps give you that level of confidence that that you are protected against that lateral compromise.
That's right. Think of it, if you're not a network genius, think of it in this context. You've got a building that you have a key to the front door. Well, if there's no segmentation, you can go anywhere inside of that building. If there is segmentation, well, certain sections of that building or rooms are off limits to you, or at least you've got to re-unlock that door to be able to get through.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, one of the challenges with network security these days, all up security these days, is the amount of data that there is to look at to be able to effectively do your job. So tell me about tooling that's going to help, from maybe even using machine learning, that really is going to take and look at that mountain of data, and raise up that one needle in the haystack that you need to see. Obviously, we have to have the tooling, but are there some names that come to mind? How are you seeing it used? These sorts of things.
Well, I think visibility is paramount, especially when you're trying to contextualize the access that you have, and when you're pursuing a zero trust model. I think that some of the cloud native toolings that you have to see what you have put up there, and maybe an S3 bucket, or a blob storage, whatever it may be. You want to understand how it might be classified, and figure out what level of interactions should be centered around that classification. What kind of roles and responsibilities should have access to that? And that means that you're probably either doing active scanning in place or validation at the time of ingest as well. And then don't forget about the transformation of the data too, where now it being combined with two records now makes it something much more
something
valuable.
Totally different. Yeah.
Yep.
That's right. AWS Security Hub, Jardo's called this out. He says is a good tool for security. Couldn't agree more.
Yes.
All of the providers have excellent tooling native to their own cloud. Challenge, of course, becomes when we have multi-cloud, when we have on-prem plus some cloud, how do you get a common viewpoint of that? Are there some common tooling or ways of pulling that together, Scott, that you've seen be successful when somebody is in a multi-cloud environment, or at least on-prem plus a cloud?
Yes. So you have some popular tool sets that
Mhm.
that are meant to get out of the particular vendor's offering, which are pretty comprehensive if you just focus on them. But once you get into multi-cloud, you want to have a consistent experience and
That's right.
things like cloud security posture management, which aligns around best practices. CASBs, if you're looking at SaaS type solutions, those are very strong as well. And then, I heard somebody mention hybrid cloud. Yeah. So, uh, if you i- i- if you're doing a strong automation play for how you deploy out your workloads, then you can
Yeah.
bake in the security along with that time of deployment so that it's predictable across your various clouds.
Well, obviously, security is not meant, should have never be an afterthought, but especially in these modern times of just not only all the transformation that's going on, but also the way the threat is presenting itself these days and advancing these days. So, Scott, I'm glad that you are here and on the job, helping us with our own product offerings, helping to secure them up. That is Scott's role here. I mentioned earlier he's a product managers here in the security space, but comes with a very deep background in guys. Whether it's a Rackspace or somewhere else, you've seen if you're familiar with Zscaler, you have some questions there. Philip has put some great information. You can friend him on LinkedIn and track down, get more about Zscaler if you want to learn more about that. But find help when it comes to your security posture for your organization. It is not something to be an afterthought. There are so many resources. You want to make sure that you are capitalizing on as many of them as possible. Well, Scott, thanks for jumping in on the deep end on this icy cold morning here in Texas.
Oh, thanks for having me. It was great fun.
Oh, I'm glad that you're here. And everyone, thank you for spending your morning with us. I hope that it is warm and dry wherever you are, because it is not that here. And we will be back next week. I think we're back on Tuesday, and we'll have some more content for you then. Until then, you can find all the information you need about this episode over at rackspace.com/solve/90. I think I can bring that up on the screen one last time. Maybe I can, if I push this button right here. There we go. And so then with that, folks, I hope that you have a great day. And I'm going to stop pushing buttons. And that'll be it for today. We'll be back next week with more Solve Live. Scott, thanks again for being here.